let's begin and let's continue to daven that the zchut of our learning should help to bring home the hostages and protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael and all of the innocents, and hopefully bring an end to the war and hopefully stave off any pending wars.
Amen.
I'm not sure how to finish that, but that's all I can think about right now. Okay, so we're picking up from here. Shatat sir o murias patur. So the Mishnah says, if you drank tsir or murias on Yom Kippur, you're patur. And tsir, we said, is essentially fish brine, and murias is like fish. It's like the fatty brine that comes with the fish. So if you drink these things on Yom Kippur, you're patur. So why are you patur if you drink these things on Yom Kippur?
They're food that's not fit to eat.
So yeah, so these are drinks that are not fit to drink. So right, it falls broadly under the category of eating on Yom Kippur, eating and drinking. And what did we say about what's the measure, what's the standard, I should say, by which we determine whether something is considered to be ra'ui l'achila, ra'ui l'shtiyah, or not?
If it brings Yeshuv Hadas.
Very good. So presumably drinking these things will not give you Yeshuv Hadas, and therefore, if you do drink them on Yom Kippur, you are patur. Again, I need to emphasize patur, meaning you're not allowed to do it, but if you do it, you won't be chayav karet. So then the Gemara asks the kasha, says, ha chometz chayav. But if you drink vinegar, you're chayav. So first of all, how does the Mishnah know, how does the Gemara know that? And what's the point of making this point?
Presumably drinking vinegar would not bring Yeshuv Hadas either.
Well,
So
if it doesn't bring Yeshuv Hadat, then you should be patur.
right. Which is the kasha, no?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that's not the kasha. What's the question? Ha chometz chayav. So ha chometz is a very short sentence. If we lengthen that sentence, what Gemara is saying is, the Mishnah says if you drink tzir or murias, you're patur. That implies that if you drink chometz, you would be on Yom Kippur, you would be chayav. So how does the Mishnah imply that drinking chometz is chayav?
If one was patur for drinking chometz, it would be in the list with seer and morias.
So presumably, if chometz is something for which you are patur, it should also be listed. And there was a point that was made last week. I don't remember now. If
is this exhaustive? Tsir and Morias?
So the question seems to be based on the idea that the Mishnah is giving us an exhaustive list. That in itself is a little difficult because we would have assumed, we might assume that the Mishnah is just giving us examples. So it gave us two examples.
Mhm.
So how does the Gemara know that chometz was purposely left out? So there's another aspect to this which was brought up last week. The other aspect of this is that, in contrast to Tzira and Murias, people do drink the vinegar.
Drink?
Yes. If you go on the internet today, if you don't have any other experience, and you look up drinking vinegar, you'll see that it's, even now, people recommend drinking vinegar as a matter of course. Now, I'm going to add that drinking vinegar, the recommendation is to drink it diluted vinegar, not to drink it straight. And that's going to come up in the sugya. This whole idea of drinking vinegar is going to come up in the sugya. But there are people, I know personally, people who drink a diluted vinegar every day because of the health benefits of drinking vinegar. So I think that this is part of what's going on in the Gemara. And then we'll also see in a minute that there's as a part of that, we'll see in a moment something else. But I think that Paul's point that we wouldn't necessarily assume that the Mishnah is giving us an exhaustive list of things that are not ra'ui l'shtiyah. That seems reasonable that it's not an exhaustive list because, you can think of a whole bunch of other things that you wouldn't want to drink, like kerosene or I don't know, even salt water, which it's a different name. In other words, there's things that so the point of tzira and murias, why I'll ask you, what would be the point of listing specifically tzira and murias as opposed to other things? Let's say, as opposed to, let's say, kerosene.
Hmm.
The seer and the morias are part of a dish. They're part of food. There's something that is eaten, the fish.
Right. In other words, those are actually edible things, and people do consume them. But they only consume them, the normal way of consuming them is when you're eating fish. So you don't necessarily get rid of the tzir or the murius when you're eating your fish. So we know that they're consumable. But the Mishnah's chidush then is that these are things that you don't drink independent of eating fish. And if you do, you would be patur. Those are things, they're not ra'ui l'shtiyah. So now maybe we also understand ha chometz chayav. So the fact is, chometz gets left out, but chometz you would think is in the same category because we eat a lot of food with chometz. You can have salad, you can put it on all kinds of things, and we consume it every day, even if we don't drink. But the implication is that if you drink chometz by itself, you would be chayav. And so why should that be? But the point is that the Gemara is saying, ha chometz chayav. The Gemara is making a diuk, right? They're uh, deriving something by implication that's not specifically in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't say shatat tzira murias patur, shatat chometz chayav. But we understand by virtue of the fact that chometz is left out of this list, and it's similar to tzir and murias, it should have been in the list. The fact that it's not in the list indicates that the Mishnah thinks that it was left out of the list on purpose, because if you drink tzir and murias, it's patur. If you drink chometz, you'll be chayav. So then the Gemara says, nitin mani. So who's the author of our Mishnah? So who wrote this Mishnah that includes tzir and murias, but leaves out chometz? The Gemara answers,
Just a question. Is the fact that the Tzir and the Murias are animal products and the Chometz is a vegetable product, does this have some importance here?
that's an interesting question, but I presumably not. But it is a distinction, right? The tzir and the murias are produced as part of preserving the fish,
Mhm.
but presumably it's not. This is not a distinction that the Gemara is making. But I don't know. Keep it in mind. Maybe it will come up elsewhere. It's an interesting distinction. So the Gemara says, okay, so now we know that the Mishnah has specifically excluded chometz. So the Gemara says, matnitin mani. So who is our Mishnah? Meaning who authored our Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi. Rabbi wrote this. How do I know? Titania, because I learned in a Braita, Rabbi Omer, chometz meshivet hanefesh. Rabbi held the halacha that chometz is meshivet hanefesh, and so therefore what? What does that tell me about our issue of Yom Kippur?
The purpose of Yom Kippur, it is food.
For the purposes of drinking on Yom Kippur, this will be considered to be drink. And Rashi comments, Meshivet nefesh umevatel ta'inui. Something that we already understand. Rashi emphasizes here that if you drink the chometz, so it puts your soul at ease, and that cancels out the inui. Okay. So then we have this this Gemara. The Gemara goes on. Darash Rav Gidel bar Menashe meibire denaresh. Rav Gidel, the son of Menashe, from the town or the place that's called Bire Denaresh. He darshaned. I think I explained this last week that darash is used as a term when a Rav got up and preached, gave a drasha. A drasha doesn't necessarily mean like a homiletic understanding of the parsha. It could also be somebody delivering a shir about halacha. It's just that's the term darash. And in his he's giving a shir. In his shir, he says, "Ein halacha karebi." Halacha is not like Rebbe. So, what was the context of his shir, and what's his sak that halacha is not like Rebbe? What was his shir about?
I assume it's about Yom Kippur.
Yeah, he's giving a shir about Hilchos Yom Kippurim, and he comes to what question?
I don't know if it's specific for chometz or what you can eat or drink on Yom Kippur.
So he's talking presumably about things you may or may not be allowed to, or not allowed, things for which you'll be chayav or patur for drinking on Yom Kippur. So presumably he already brought in his drasha, he presumably learned what we just learned. In other words, he learned our Mishnah. And the Mishnah, right? Because that would be a normal thing to give to use the Mishnah as part of your shir. And the Mishnah says Shatat Tzira Murias. And then he taught them that Rebbe said that Chometz is Meshivet Nefesh, and Ein Halacha Karebi. We don't hold halacha to be like Rebbe. So if halacha is not like Rebbe, so then what would that mean? According to Rav Gidel, what's the din of chometz on Yom Kippurim?
If one drank chometz, one would be patur.
One would be patur. Very good. So what happened? L'shana nafki kule alma, mazgu v'shatu chala. So the next year, nafki kule alma, the whole world went out. In other words, the whole community went out, and mazgu v'shatu chala. So we already explained what's mazgu mean. What's limzog?
To dilute or mix with water.
So everybody went out and they mixed some vinegar with water and they drank it. When did they drink it?
Presumably Yom Kippur.
On Yom Kippur. So in other words, Rav Gidel gives this shear, and he says, look, halach is not like Rebbe. So now people understand if they drink chometz on Yom Kippur, they'll be patur. So what do? They go out and they take their chometz and they dilute it with water, and they're drinking it on Yom Kippur. Shamar Rav Gidel v'ikpid. Rav Gidel heard, and he was makpid. He was. I was looking at different translations of this, but um, in other words, he was particular that they shouldn't be doing this. And what did he say? Amar. He said, Amar da Amri Ana diavad l'chatchila mi Amri. So let's say that I said post facto, de facto, b'diavad, but do we say it l'chatchila? So what does he mean? What's b'diavad and what's l'chatchila?
Mm. So he's saying that if you already drank chametz on Yom Kippur, okay, very well, good, but you shouldn't do it. You should actually go out and do it.
So yeah, in other words, he said. So what is he saying? Yes, he's saying like what Michael Werner is saying that. Look, what I said, you could imply from what I said that if you drank chometz on Yom Kippur, you would be patur. That would be the implication of saying ein halacha karebi. But I never said that you're lechatchila allowed to drink chometz on Yom Kippur. Furthermore, Emar the Amri Ana Purta, Tuva mi Amri. You could say that I said what I said implied a little, but who said a lot? So what's he saying there? What were the people doing, and what's Rav Gidel saying?
They must have really been drinking it, not just a little sip, but really drinking it.
Chugging vinegar, yes.
So presumably they're drinking more than a shiur, right? So what's the shiur for drinking on Yom Kippur?
Mm. A full cheekful.
A cheekful. So presuming they're drinking, everybody's out drinking, and clearly more than a cheekful. So he says, what I said, maybe you could imply what I said would apply to a little. That is, naniach that you're not allowed the chatchila to drink. But let's say, for whatever reason, you feel you have to drink something on Yom Kippur. So what would I say? I could say that maybe what is implied is that if you drink a little, okay, then you would be patur. That gets into the question of chatzi shiur at the beginning of the parak. But He's saying naniach. Okay, if you like, in other words, what's he complaining about? What's he driving at?
It's people, it sounds like people, I don't know whether they either misunderstood or like kind of like took advantage of his interpretation or his ruling.
Yeah, basically he's coming down on them because it's like the people who are doing this, it's like they found a loophole. Like, oh, Rav Gidel said halacha is not like Rebbe, meaning if I drink chometz on Yom Kippur, it's patur. And he's saying, look, first of all, lechatchila, you're not allowed to drink anything on Yom Kippur. And the second of all, naniach that you're going to drink, but you should be, mafriz al midah, like you're exaggerating, you're drinking a lot, and you should only, if you have to drink, so drink a little. And that gets into the question, which we haven't, which we touched on earlier, which is drinking the shiurim, right? Let's say if you have to drink on Yom Kippur, that you drink less than a shiur every so often, right? According, toch kedei achilat pras or toch kedei shtiyat revi'it, it's a machoket poskim about how you measure, but naniach. And then he says, Emod amri ana chai, mazug mi amri. Says, let's say what I said about raw, in other words, just full strength vinegar. But who would say such a thing about diluted vinegar? And so what's the difference between the full strength vinegar and the diluted vinegar in a practical sense?
Full strength would not bring a shuva das, and diluted presumably would.
Possibly. In other words, that according to, so when Rebbe says chometz is meshivet nefesh, so what was he talking about? Was he talking about full strength vinegar, or was he talking about diluted vinegar?
Presumably he's talking about diluted.
It might be that he's talking only about diluted vinegar. And even if I say ein halacha karebi and you're patur, even then I would still say emir da'anachai, that you would be patur if you drank undiluted. In other words, if it's undiluted, then it's not going to be meshivat nefesh. But I wouldn't say such a thing about diluted vinegar. So what's the upshot here? If this is the end of the sugya. So what would you say halacha is regarding drinking vinegar on Yom Kippur?
That one perhaps could drink undiluted vinegar, although I wouldn't advise it. But or one is patur if one drinks diluted
Very
vinegar.
good. I'm glad you corrected yourself. One would be patur for drinking undiluted vinegar, but what?
But not diluted vinegar.
And not diluted vinegar. Very good. Let's take a second and we'll look at let's look at the Rambam. So the Rambam says in Hilchot Shvitat Asur, Perek Bet Halacha Vav. He says, Shatach chometz mazug b'mayim chayav. If one drinks vinegar that's diluted with water on Yom Kippur, you're chayav. So how does he know that?
It's a direct quote from Rebbe.
No, what did Rebbe hold? Well, it's not a direct quote from Rebbe. What do we learn from Rebbe?
We learn from Rebbe that one cannot, or one is patur for drinking undiluted chametz, but chametz mixed wine with water, one is not patur, and so therefore one is chayav. I.e.,
Okay. All right, so we're learning from two things. Like, so from Rebbe, what did Rebbe say? He says Rebbe said chometz is meshivat nefesh. So if it's meshivat nefesh, it would mean that if you drink chometz on Yom Kippurim, you're chayav. Then we have the drasha of Rav Gidel, and subsequently how people, took his drasha, and then his final comments. So based on the conclusion of that we get from Rav Gidel, we would understand, because he takes issue with the community that's drinking diluted chometz on Yom Kippur. He takes issue with them. He makes it clear that that's not permitted. So he's saying shata chometz mazug b'mayim chayav. What did Rebbe say? Rebbe just said chometz is meshiv nefesh. And then Rav Gidel said halacha is not like Rebbe. And that's also his conclusion. Halacha is not like Rebbe. So now I ask you again, when Rebbe says chometz is meshivat nefesh, what kind of chometz was he talking about?
Oh, diluted chametz.
I think
If-
he's talking about any, he may be talking about any chametz at all whatsoever.
Well, listen, if halacha is not like Rebbe, let's go through the sugya again. We had the Mishnah that says if you drink tzir amurias on Yom Kippur, that you're patur. The diuk is if you drink chometz, you're chayav. And we attribute that, so we attribute our Mishnah to Rebbe. Because Rebbe holds that chometz is meshivat nefesh. Rav Gidel says halacha is not like Rebbe. So if halacha is not like Rebbe, that would mean what? If you drink chometz on Yom Kippur, you're patur. What does Rav Gidel hold about drinking chometz?
So it, I mean, broad strokes.
Not no fancy introductions. What does Rav Gidel hold?
Well, I mean, following. I mean, in the final passages, he suggests that undiluted. I mean, diluted. I mean, undiluted chametz does not bring. Does not mishiv hanefesh. Therefore, one is patur. However, diluted vinegar does bring yeshuv hadas, and therefore one is chayav.
Okay, the last thing you said certainly is true, right? The last thing you said is certainly true. The Rav Gidel holds if you drink chometz mazug on Yom Kippur that you're chayav because it's meshivat nefesh. Rav Gidel also held that the halacha is not like Rebbe. So what kind of chometz was Rebbe talking about?
I mean, either he was talking about undiluted chametz, or he's talking about chametz in general.
Chometz.
Chametz. Did I say
Yeah,
something?
I'm sorry. I might have said chometz. I apologize. Well, if, in other words, if he's talking about in general, then what you're saying is, I want to include chometz whether it's diluted or not diluted. So then halacha would be like Rebbe, according to Reb Gidel, in the case of when it's diluted. But Reb Gidel says halacha is not like Rebbe. So
So
what kind of
therefore,
so therefore what?
So therefore, Rebbe is talking about undiluted chametz.
Very good. So Rebbe just says stam chometz mishivat nefesh. So presumably we have to say that he's talking about undiluted chometz, and that if you drink undiluted chometz on Yom Kippur, that you're chayav because it's mishiv nefesh. Rav Gidel says we don't hold like that. And so, what did Rav Gidel mean to say? In other words, Rav Gidel, if he had been more careful in his drasha, he would have said, halach is not like Rebbe, that if you drink chometz that's not diluted, right, lo mazug, on Yom Kippur, you'll be patur from onesh. The people who were listening to his shiur, though, they thought, like Michael Werner thought, maybe that just includes any chometz in any way, shape, or form. So they thought, oh, so I'll drink the chometz, but I'll add water to it. It'll make it more easy to drink. And Rav Gidel's conclusion is, no, that's also, you're not allowed to drink chometz that's diluted. That's not what I meant. That's not what Rebbe was talking about. Rebbe was talking about undiluted chometz. And that's why I say halach is not like Rebbe, meaning if you drank undiluted chometz on Yom Kippur, that would be patur. But here you're drinking chometz mazug, so you're chayav. And that's the way the Rambam paskins. While we're here, let's read the rest of this Rambam. This has to do with what we just learned before. Hakoses pilpilin v'zangvil yavesh uchiyotze bahen patur. Right, so if you chew on peppers and ginger that are dry, or things like that, on Yom Kippur, you're patur of a zangvil ratuv chayav, but zangvil ratuv, you're chayav. So here, when we're reading this Rambam, we have a question. Koses pilpalin v'zangvil yavesh. We have a question. What does the yavesh refer to? What's yavesh?
Dried.
What? But which?
It would seem to be that it's
Yeah.
based on sandwich that's modifying zangvil, ginger.
So at minimum, it's modifying the ginger. And why might I think that that's all the Rambam means? In other words, we could be saying a koses pilpelin, whether they're moist or whether they're dry, and zangvil only if it's dry. In those cases, you're patur. But zangvil ratuv chayav. Zangvil that's ratuv, you're chayav. In other words, why would I think that the yavesh in the first line only refers to zangvil?
Because the next clause refers only to Zangvil.
Because he only points out zangvil, particularly in the second clause. Just a second. Just a moment. Let's take a moment and go back earlier in the Rambam. Just a moment. Let me make sure you can see this. So this is the second parak of Hilchot Shvitat Esor. Rambam says, "Ha'ochel b'yom kippurim ma'achalim haru'uyim la'adam kikotevet hagasa shi pachot michabetza bim'at harei ze chayav." So somebody eats food that is fit for a person the size of a fat date, which is a little bit less than a kibetza, right? And that we learned that in an earlier sugya where the Gemara tries to determine exactly how big the kotev and hagasa is, and it determines that it's a little bit less than a kibetza. So you're chayav. Any edible food that you eat combines for this shiur. V'chein hashoteh mashkin haru'uyin l'shtiyat adam kimlo lugmav shel shoteh kol echad v'echad lefi lugmav chayav. If you drink a cheekful of any kind of liquid that's fit for drinking, for people to drink, he emphasizes l'shtiyat adam, as opposed to something that maybe a dog might consume, that people wouldn't consume. That's a standard that we use elsewhere in Pesach. Once chametz is no longer ra'ui l'achilat kelev, it's no longer considered to be chametz for the purposes of being over on Bal Yirai or Bal Yimatzeh. Anyway, right, and each person according to his cheek, you're chayav. Bekama melo lugmav kedei yisalken letzad echad v'yira emalei. Right, so he defines melo lugmav. It's enough that you push all of the liquid to one side of your mouth, and it looks like the cheek is full. V'shir zeh ba'adam beinoni pachot mirviyit, and that for an average person, that's less than a revi'it. V'chol hamashkim mitztarfin l'shiur zeh. All drinks combined for this shiur. V'achila shtia ein mitztarfin l'shiur echad. Right, we learned that from the Mishnah that eating and drinking are not mitztaref. So if you add half of kotevet hagasa and half of melo lugmav, those things are not mitztaref, and you still wouldn't be chayav on Yom Kippur. Echad ha'ochel ochlim hamutarin, o shechal dvarim ha'asurim, kegon pigul v'notar v'tevel v'nevelot v'trefot v'chelev v'odam, ho'il v'yachal achalim haru'yim la'adam harei ze chayav karet mishum ochel b'yom kippurim. So whether you eat food that's permitted or whether you eat food that's not permitted, what would not be permitted? Like pigul, notar, tevel, nevelot, trefot, chelev, blood, any of these things that the Torah forbids you from eating. But if you eat them on Yom Kippur, you're still chayav because they're still fit for human consumption. We also saw that in an earlier part of the Gemara. So if you eat or drink, okay, I'm losing people here. If you eat or drink less than this shiur, you're not chayav karet. Af al pishu asur min Torah b'chatzi shiur. Even though it's asur from the Torah, this chatzi shiur, meaning less than a shiur, less than a full shiur. Ein chayavin karet ela al kashiur v'ochel shoteh chatzi shiur makinoto makat mardut. Rambam holds like Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara. The chatzi shiur is asur min Torah, and so you'll be chayav makat mardut if you eat or drink less than a shiur. Achal ma'at v'chazar v'yachal v'chazar v'yachal. Let's say you ate a little, and then you ate again, and then you ate again. Im yesh mitchilat achila rishona ad sof achila achrona kedei achilat shalosh beitzim, harei elu mitztarfot l'cheshiur, v'im lav ein mitztarfot. So the Rambam here is defining what the Gemara calls kedei achilat pras. We saw this is a machokas rishonim, and the Rambam holds that a pras would be 3 beitzim. So if you eat a shiur in the time it takes to eat 3 beitzim, then they're mitzdaref, in which case you'll be chayav. And if not, if you took longer to eat between these little nashes that you're having, then they're not mitzdarfot. The same thing he'll say for drinking. Shata ma'at v'chazar v'shata v'chazar v'shata. Im yesh mitchilat shtiya rishana ad sof shtiya achrona kedei shtiyat revi'it. The Rambam holds that the shiur for drinking, the time that you would have to drink in order for whatever you're drinking to be mitzdaref, is based on a shiur of drinking, which is kedei shtiyat revi'it, which, as I said, it's a machoket rishonim, but the Rambam holds it's kedei shtiyat revi'it. So then it's mitzarfin l'shiur, and if not, ein mitzarfin. So now we get more to our issue. Achal achalim sheinan ru'uyim l'ma'achal adam. If you ate food that's not fit for human consumption, kigon asavim hamarim, osrafim ha'be'ushim, the bitter grasses or other, bad things to eat. Osheshatamashkin she'enan ru'uyin. If you drank drinks that were not fit for drinking, kigon, tzir, o murias, v'chometz chai. If you drank tzir, o murias, or unadulterated vinegar, undiluted vinegar. So you see, the Rambam learned what we just learned in our sugya, that if you say halacha is not like Rebbe, what we understand is that Rebbe held when he said that chometz is meshivat hanefesh, he was talking about chometz chai. If I say halacha is not like Rebbe, then it means that I would add it to the list that's in the Mishnah. So it would be just like tzir and murias. If you drink them on Yom Kippur, you would be patur. So similarly, also if you drink chometz chai, you'll be patur. Afil achal v'shata mehen harbe. Even if you ate and drank a lot of them, in other words, more than a shiur, hareza patur mina karet. So you won't be chayav karet, aber makinato makat mardut. But nonetheless, you're still not allowed to do it. It's asur midirabanan, and you'll get the punishment that's meted out for being over on it. Dirabanan is makat mardut. And now we see shatach chometz mazug b'mayim chayav. Akoses pilpelin v'zangvil yavesh yotzei bahen patur, aval zangvil ratuv chayav. And then this is from the sugya right before. Achal alei gefanim patur. If you eat grape leaves, you're patur. Lulavei gefanim chayav. If you eat the shoots from the grapevine, you're chayav. Ve'elu hein lulavei gefanim. These are lulavei gefanim for this purpose. Kol shelivlavu be'eretz Yisrael me Rosh Hashanahvad Yoma Kippurim. Right, so we saw that was a machloket Amoraim, and he holds like the daya that says that these are the shoots that grew from between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yeter al zeh, harei hein keitzim upatur, v'chein kol ki yotzei beilu. But if the shoots were older than that, then if you eat them on Yom Kippur, then it's just like eating wood, and you're patur. Just a second. So the Magid Mishnah says here, Akoses pilpelin v'zangvil yavesh u'chiyotzei bahen patur, aval zangvil ratuv chayav. He says, Kachi anuscha b'ktzat sifrei Rabbeinu. So this is the textual version that we have in some of the copies of the Mishnah Torah from Rabbeinu, from our master, the Rambam. Ulefi zeh nira de'ein chiluk b'pilpilin bein retuvin bein yeveshin. So based on this girsa, there is no difference between chewing on the fresh or the moist peppers or the dry peppers, right? That's the way we would learn it. Ve'ein ochein, but it's not so. Divadai mevuar b'gmara sham depilpelin retuvin chayav. Because we learn explicitly in the Gemara that the Gemara says that when Rava said that if you chew on pilpelin on Yom Kippur that you're patur, the Gemara explicitly said it was talking about dried peppers and not moist peppers. V'chein katav Rabbeinu perek chet mi'ilchot brachot sheru'uyin hen la'achila, and the Rambam holds elsewhere, which we'll look at just a second. In other words, when he talks about saying a bracha, he makes that distinction also about pilpilin. Milchot brachot sheruyin hen lachil pashud hu lefikach ikar nuscha aval retuvin chayav. In other words, he wants to fix the nusach that appears in the Rambam. Just a second. So this is the Rambam in Perek Chet from Hilchot Brachot. And he says, Hapilpelin v'hazangvil bizman shehein retuvin. When both the pepper and the ginger are moist, mivarech alein tchila borei peri hadama. Aval yiveshim einan tunin bracha lo lifnehem v'lo lachreihem, mimnei shehein tavlin ve'eino ochel. If you eat them when they're dry, they don't require a bracha either before or after, because they're spices and they're not food. V'chein ochlin she'enan ru'uyin la'achila, mashkin she'enan ru'uyin l'shtiya, einan tunin bracha lo lifneihem v'lo lachreihem. So we discussed this, right? There's a relationship between Hilchot Brachot and Hilchot Yoma Kippurim regarding food that's ra'ui to eat and food that's not ra'ui to eat. If food is ra'ui to eat, then you have to say a bracha on it. If it's not ra'ui to eat, then you don't say a bracha on it. And so, Magid Mishnah is proving from here that this nusach that we see in the Rambam can't be correct. And when he says a koseis pilpilin of a zangvil yavesh kiyotzei behen patur, that part is okay, because there, like we said, yavesh could be modifying zangvil and pilpilin, but that's undermined by the next part. It says aval zangbil ratuv chayav, and so the Magid Misha says it should just say aval rituvin chayav. That if they, the pilpilin and the zangbil are yavesh, then you're chayav. Okay, that's a little bit of lamdus that we don't usually do, but once in a while, it's worth looking at. And let's just look now and see the din in the Shulchan Aruch, and I think that'll be it for tonight. So here, this is in Orach Chaim. Wait a second. Did I share the screen? Hold on. Yeah, okay. Okay, so what does it say? This is the Orach Chaim in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, Siman Tafrei Shud Bet. So this is Halacha L'Maseh. One who drinks on Yom Kippur a cheekful, pirish melo piv, a mouthful, chayav, u'misharim b'chol adam lefi mashuhu. We measure this by every person according to what he is. Hagadol lefi gadol, v'katan lefi katno. Right? If you're a big person, you have a big cheekful. If you're a small person, you have a small cheekful. But nonetheless, it goes according to who you are individually. It's not literally the cheek spool. It's like we said, right? If you push all the liquid to one side so that one cheek pushes out, that's melo lugmav. It's less than a revi'it in an average person. Right, so far it's mostly like what the Rambam said. Haggad, the Ramah adds, Shata mashkin sheinan ru'uyin l'shtiyah kigon tzir omurias v'chometz chai. So he paskins like the Rambam, that if you drink raw vinegar, undiluted vinegar, it's like drinking the fish brine, and you would be patur aval chometz mazug chayav. If you drink diluted vinegar on Yom Kippur, then you're chayav. On this, the Mishnah Berurah says chometz chai. He goes into a little more detail. But dafka shemeba'abeya kishemashlichin oto al haaretz. Does eino ra'ui l'shtiyah patur afilu shata harbe yoter mechishiur. She says, only if it bubbles when you throw it on the ground. In other words, this is really raw vinegar. It's like fresh vinegar. And it'll bubble when you throw it on the ground. So then that's certainly not fit for drinking, even if you drank a lot of it. And even if you drank more than a kashiot, the kevanshu chometz chazak tfei maziko, because this vinegar is so strong, it will harm him. In other words, it's harmful to drink. Some people say, nonetheless, if you drink a lot, you would be chayav. Das shovera avono, because it will nonetheless break your hunger. In other words, maybe it's not something you would normally drink, and maybe it's not really fit for drinking. But if you end up drinking a lot, I'll put in different words, it'll fill your belly. But nonetheless, everybody holds that you're not allowed to drink even a little bit. And here's the bepurta that we saw from Rav Gidel, right? That's the Gemara of Rav Gidel. But chometz that's diluted, you're chayav. He says, because it's fit for drinking. And like I say, there are people who drink diluted vinegar every day of the year. So what can I tell you? All right, I took the time to look at this a little bit more in the halacha because I wanted to finish the sugya here. And next week is Rosh Hashanah, right? So we won't be meeting next week, but the next time we meet, we'll be looking at the next part of the sugya, which begins at the beginning of Daf Pei Bet Amud Aleph, and that's the Mishnah about children and what we as their parents are obligated in terms of chinuch to have them, how they have to conduct themselves on Yom Kippur. So we'll just remind ourselves of the Mishnah. I think that'll be it for tonight. So the Mishnah says that tinokot is, we're going to define what tinokot is, but we'll just to say children. Ein ma'aninotan b'yom kippurim. We don't make them suffer, right? We don't make them undergo inuyim on Yom Kippurim. Aval mechanchin otan lifnei shana v'lifnei shnatayim. But we educate them, as we teach them, before a year and before 2 years. Bishvil shiyu regilim b'mitzvot, so that they will be accustomed to doing mitzvot. So then we'll see there are different opinions in the Gemara about this, and so we'll leave that for next time. I think this is a good place to stop. Again, you're all invited to read ahead and look at the Gemara and look at Rashi, or if you want, look at Steinsaltz, look at the translations. Yeah, there are plenty of resources. You can read ahead in the next part of the Gemara. But I think that's it for tonight. Any last questions or comments? So no, so let me wish everybody a Shana Tova and hope that it brings us much blessing and should all stay safe.
Amen. Thank you. Good night. Shana Tova.
Shana
Shana Tova.
Tova. Bye-bye.